Hi everyone, this is part 2 of the tests and quizzes demonstration in Sakai. In this video, you will learn how to manage the settings and publish an exam for your students. Let's get started. In your course, select Tests and Quizzes, and under the Working Copies folder, you'll see the quiz that we created in the previous video. Under the Action tab, select Settings. We'll go through these quickly, and I'll point out the main things that you need to successfully set and publish your exam. The first is the assessment release, and this is to the entire site. That's the standard. The first question is, how many submissions will you allow students to turn in? If it's unlimited, you may want to use that for any sort of a practice exam. Otherwise, I would click Only and then determine how many times the student may take the exam. For our example, we're going to select 1. The availability date is the next important feature. If they're taking the exam in class on a specific day and time, you'll make sure to put that date and time there. Otherwise, if they're taking it at home, you may click on the calendar and select the first date that they'll be able to see the exam. I'm going to select the 11th. You'll see also that you can also set the exact time for the exam to be visible. The next field is the due date, and as before, click on the calendar and select your due date. I'm going to pick January 15th. Here again, I'm going to change the date. I'm going to say 11:59 p.m. so that they have up until just midnight. If my exam has a time limit, I need to click the box here and then set the amount of time that I want them to have. What happens here is once that time is up, whatever work they've done is automatically submitted and the exam closes. Will you accept late submissions for students who did not take the exam during the specified time? If you want to allow a late submission, you can say yes, and it will be marked late. If you do say yes, you need to decide how late the exam can be turned in. And again, you'll click on the calendar and pick a date and time. For our example, we're going to say no. The ensure students take exams from a specific location is not something that's used typically, so we're going to skip this section. And we're going to go on to the next, which is adding a message. If you'd like to provide any sort of message after the exam is finished, this would be the place to put it. Sometimes an instructor will just write congratulations, or they'll put some other specific information that lets students know, for example, when they can see the feedback or other information. As an option, you can also point them to a web page by putting the URL here. Once you do that, when they finish the exam, that URL link will show up for them. Again, this is an area that's not usually critical, so we'll move on to grading and feedback. In this section, we first want to start with who's grading your exams. If you have a TA, you may not want them to be able to see specific student names and IDs, so you can click Anonymous Grading and they won't be able to tell whose work they're grading. Typically, if you're the one doing the grading, we leave it so that the IDs are visible by the grader. Gradebook options. This is important. I would click here, grades are sent to the gradebook. What happens when you do this is an item is automatically created in your gradebook, and then once the student's work is submitted and the exams are graded, the grades are posted directly to the gradebook. If you manually created an item in gradebook already for the exam, you'll need to delete that in order for this one to feed the grades. If you allowed multiple submissions per user, which score do you want to land in the gradebook, the highest score or the last score? Those are your options. We did not set up feedback for the exam that we created, but if you did, this would tell you what level you want to provide. You could pick one, question level or selection level, or both. Feedback delivery is important. If you select immediate feedback, then as soon as they click an answer, the feedback shows. Typically, we would say either feedback on submission, no feedback at all, or feedback on a specific date. If you choose on a specific date, this prevents students from sharing feedback with one another until the exam is closed. So you may want to choose that and then just make sure and select a date after the exam has closed. Releasing the students' assessment scores means that they can only see their score and no questions. Sometimes we want students to be able to see the questions and know whether they got the answers right or wrong. If you select Release Questions in the following, you might select the student response and the correct response. At the very least, they'll know what they said and then what the correct answer was. Finally, we'll look at the layout. Navigation is important. Do you want the students to go through the exam only one time without being able to back up? If so, you'll have linear access with no return to previous pages. Otherwise, you can choose random access where they can move back and forth. There are next and previous buttons on each page. For question layout, is each question going to be on a separate page? If you created parts of an exam, is each part on a separate page, or do you want the entire exam on one main page? I would be careful about putting everything on one main page unless it's a really short exam so that there are no timing out issues when the students are online. Otherwise, you might just put each question is on a separate web page. Numbering, if you use parts, do you want the numbers to continue between parts or start over? Adding checkboxes allows students, if you've allowed them random access, to put a check in a box to say, I'm not really sure about this answer, and when I'm done, I want to review it. By doing that, they can go back to a table of contents and they can see which questions they checked so that they can review them before they submit. Background color, we recommend that you really not tamper with this. You can change the background color of an exam or put an image there, but make sure that does not detract from the actual exam. Once you're finished, click Save Settings and Publish or Save. If you're not sure yet that you're done with everything, you can click Save and come back to Settings, and everything that you did fill out will still be there. However, if you're ready to publish the exam, then click Save Settings and Publish. You'll see a notice here. You have the option to publish it with or without a notification, which means if you send the notification to students, it'll be an email that tells them that it's available. This tells you that the availability date and time that you set, the due date and time, tells you the time limit, and the other details of the exam. If you're okay with all of this, then go ahead and click Publish. Now you'll see in the Publish Copies column that you have this exam here. Remember, if you need help at any time or need to brush up on any of the details presented here, click on the Help button in any of your courses in Sakai, and then click on the Instructor Guide. Select your topic, and in this case we were doing tests and quizzes, and you'll see a listing of all of the basic components of a test and quiz. So if you have a question here, this is the best place to go to get immediate assistance. This is the conclusion of video number 2. The third video is going to be pointers on how to help students be successful when taking an exam and how to avoid problems that could create issues with an exam in process.